It's a great feeling once a successful 3D print is finished. You may be eager to grab it and quickly remove it from the build plate. However, there's some things to consider before taking it off. Because of the use of adhesion materials on FDM printers, blue painter's tape, hairspray, or a glue stick, some prints may be tough to remove. Using a glue stick may be the trickiest of the three. You want to be sure that removing the part doesn't damage it in the process. Here's some suggestions on removing the part properly off the build plate. Extreme care should be used when removing the part off the build plate. In many cases, you may need to pry a part off using a tool. Using a putty knife is a great tool to get under the part and pry upward. This doesn't have a particularly sharp edge. Whether you're using a semi-sharp tool like this one, or potentially something with a sharper edge, you should always pry away from your body to avoid injury. In addition, parts will always be easier to remove as soon as possible after print completion, as opposed to trying to remove them after it's sat around for a while. You can also be strategic during the design phase. You can integrate a feature on the base of the part that will allow you to easily remove it. A pry slot located around the outer edge will greatly aid in this process, but may not always be possible given the part's design and geometry. Once the part has been removed, it's also the best time to make sure that the build plate is also free of any leftover material and ready to be used again. In the case of the Formlabs SLA printer we're using, the manufacturer has supplied a fixture in which to mount and hold the build platform for easier part removal. Their slicer software also produces a continual pry slot around the raft section of the part, in which you can use their pry tool to remove the part more easily. In many cases, it may be best to remove the build plate from the 3D printer to get better access and leverage when removing the part. Each machine is slightly different in how the build plate is removed and replaced. Once you know how to remove it, you typically follow the same steps in reverse to replace it in the machine. After you pry the part off the build plate, make sure all the surfaces are clean and there aren't any pieces still stuck to it, or that there's any debris left over. This will help ensure that the plate will nest back into the machine securely. If you do need to replace the build plate, it's best to take a bit of time to make sure the plate has been securely placed and to be sure everything looks visually correct. This will help make sure it's ready for the next print. If the plate looks crooked or doesn't seem secure in its position, it's best to remove it and try again. Some printers also have a leveling procedure you can follow after the build plate has been replaced, which will guarantee that the build plate is flat before printing your next part. If you're done printing parts for the day, you'll want to make sure the machine is either in rest mode or it's shut down. If it's not going to be used again right away, it's best to fully shut down the machine and power it off. Most FDM printers will do just fine leaving cold material in the extrusion nozzle, but it's recommended to purge any material from it using the load or purge function of the machine if it's going to sit for any extended period of time. For SLA printers, you can simply empty any unused resin back into the cartridge of the machine if it will not be used for some time. The resin is UV sensitive, so be sure it's not exposed to direct UV light prior to adding it back in the cartridge. This could cause misprints and other issues in the machine in the future.